Alrighty. So once again, thank you all for taking a moment today to spend some time with us to go over the benefits of the job and career fairs. So hopefully with some sort of thumbs up or whatever, hopefully everyone can see my screen here on the benefits of job and career fair. So without further ado, just as an idea of who's with us tonight, from the Argonne side, you have myself and Steph, who's our comms lead. And Steph is actually going to be leading us through this webinar tonight. I always like to bring up an acknowledgement really fast that CyberForce program, which includes this webinar series, as well as all of our awesome competitions, would not be possible without the support of the Department of Energy's Office of Cybersecurity, Energy Security, and Emergency Response, or CSER for short, and many of the other Department of Energy offices. If you're unaware, we have a lot of opportunities in CyberForce for people. So that includes this webinar series. We have the virtual career fair that comes up here fairly quickly in the next month for any of you that are participating, which is why we felt this webinar would be a great time frame for everyone. We have our Conquer the Hill series, which is our virtual competitions. And then we also have our CyberForce competition, which is in November, which is our in-person competition. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'm happy to answer them, or we can put our email in there and we're happy to answer them. Without further ado, I'm going to take away myself and I will send it on over to Steph.
Hi, I'm Steph. I've been with Argonne National Lab for about 6 years now. Started as an analyst, and I've been working with, started as a CyberForce competition. Now I work with Amanda under the Workforce Development Group, particularly the CyberForce program. It's been fun trying to get to meet different people throughout our career fairs and our webinar series this year as we've expanded the program. So we're excited to have this one tonight, and this is very informal. If you have any questions, feel free to unmute, or also just to throw it in the chat. I'll be watching that as we go along. So very informal. If you just want to throw out some questions or comments, we are happy to take them. So joining us tonight, we'll have 3 different speakers. As you can see, we have our panelists. Just this short section here will be John Donaldson from Lawrence Livermore National Lab, and then also from the career fair participant viewpoint, we have David joining us as well. So that'll be this first section. And then following that will be Robert from Employment Boost, who has joined us as well, who will kind of go through, the tips and the, background of resumes and go back to the basics. So without further ado, I'm going to let John kind of introduce himself, give a quick background as to who he is.
Thanks, Steph. So yeah, as I said, I am John Donaldson. I am a cybersecurity researcher at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. I have been working at the lab full-time for about 10.5 years now. And I started as an intern about 3 years before that, both working in the summers and through the school year. And I've done a wide range of work in cybersecurity, a lot on the incident response and operations side, doing development, especially looking at malware analysis, network traffic analysis, and now support more of our research work, applying some of the same sorts of skills to solve big and interesting challenges there.
Awesome. And then David, if you want to give yourself a little background.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. As prior, appreciate the opportunity, Steph, and thank you for the brief introduction. I didn't expect you to pronounce my last name. So
I wasn't going to chance it.
more power to you. It's a long Polish last name. So my name is David Mikowicz. I'm based out of Chicagoland. Been in the labor force for quite some time now. Ran my own business, been involved with youth sports, all the way through financials, all the way through working in the energy sector, and most recently in solar energy, working on project management and kind of working with clients and things like that for my prior organization. So I've been around a lot. Have a continued strong interest in Argonne ever since I graduated from Benedictine University, which is just, for most people who aren't in the area, it's just north of Argonne, about 30 minutes north of Argonne proper. So like I said, I have a continued interest. Just wanted to share a few things about the fair, and just looking forward to meeting and networking with everybody. So appreciate the time and looking forward to everything.
Awesome. I'm going to start with you, David, just to facilitate, kind of get the chat going. Really high level. I know you've participated in our most recent career fair through Argonne, and just kind of give your top, let's say, 3 benefits of being attendee of that career fair. It was virtual, held online,
Right.
which, can be a new aspect, post, in person, but just kind of give us your top 3 benefits of attending that career fair.
Well, definitely. In such a short period of time, which 3 hours is about how long the fair was, I was able to really network with a lot of people, which is strong. So I find the value to that being is I'm sharing emails directly with people right there. So regardless, when opportunities do pop up, and we all are in fields and things that opportunities are going to continue to present themselves. So I found it very important that I was able to connect via email with everybody, every recruiter, everybody who I kind of spoke with was able to share their email with me and said, hey, if there's anything that interests you, please reach out to me, or vice versa. So those are the 2 main benefits: is the networking and just being able to have direct access, to somebody's contact information. As simple as that sounds, it's you go to a job fair and sometimes you give out business cards here or there, but the way everything was structured, it's already structured to be, networked and communicated on in that regard. Also, the other benefit is I learned a lot about a lot of different companies all over the United States that there's so many companies. We're huge, relatively large economy. So I was able to learn, talk to people from the East Coast to the West Coast, which was amazing just to have that in one setting. So I really found that beneficial to kind of see the structure and opportunities, not only locally, but also across the nation, where we don't know what our future holds sometimes. And I think it's important to have options and contacts outside of, just my local area. So that's what the benefit was, is just being a networking, exchanging those emails, and being able to kind of communicate across the nation was really nice, and really had just a strong feel for getting to know other markets too. So that's what was neat about it.
Right. Yeah. And then John, I'll jump to you on the other standpoint. We always talk about the benefits of the participants coming. What are kind of the benefits of, industry or labs or, academia hosting these kind of events?
So I'll go a little bit off of something David mentioned.
Yeah.
In my perspective, one of the most important things I can do participating in a career fair is marketing my lab. And there are a lot of people who approach it as just collecting resumes from people who already have interest in your organization. But there are a huge number of organizations out there who are trying to hire people, and not all of them are names that everybody has at the front of their mind. And so being able to talk with people about, here are the kinds of things we do, here is what maybe sets us apart from someone else, here are the opportunities that exist, I think is really valuable. Because if we can get someone interested in us, they're more likely to be able to find a position here, and or find positions anywhere. I mean, if I still count it as a win if someone can go find a job somewhere else and is happy and successful there. So I think, yeah, the big thing for me is the sort of visibility and marketing from our side. And then I agree 100% with David, making those connections with people so that you can put a name and a face together and be like, oh yeah, I know so-and-so who I think is just the right fit for this position that I'm looking at right now.
Right. So it's not even necessarily just, getting a job on the spot. It's also about, as David mentioned, the networking, getting your company out there. Not everyone knows what a national lab is, or, people always think of the big type companies when they get, like an IT degree, but there's a lot of opportunities at labs, at, private sector that people don't think of. So yeah, I think that's huge also when it comes to career fairs.
Yeah, and I think it's so I came through the SFS program when I was a student, and I think one of the things I took away from that is that a lot of people, when they think about cyber, especially within the U.S. government, they think about the big 3-letter agencies who are hiring hundreds of people a year in those fields. But I think realistically, the biggest need for talent are smaller, less known organizations that are hiring tens of people a year or less. And there's sort of a situation where, like, unless you know about them, you're not going to just run across them in the news.
Right. And then, David, I'll jump back to you. Have you participated in career fairs? You know, this one obviously most recent you did was virtual. How do you think that was unique compared to, you know, an in-person career fair that you've done in the past?
Right. So big difference. Obviously virtually, besides all the techie stuff, because what I didn't realize going into it is maybe I didn't read the fine print, and it's not a big deal, but there was actually 15-minute time limits per order, which makes perfect sense if you think about it logically. There are people in line waiting to speak with somebody, so obviously they have to time it out. So I think in preparation for any future job fairs, if you go in, just know that there's an allocated amount of time, and obviously we want to be cognizant and respectful of each other's time. And it makes sense why there's a timer. The only thing that I provided as feedback, and I believe to the program and everything, is just being able to maybe communicate a little easier, because there was a chat there and it feels like everything kind of got cut off after that timer expires. I think that's important to follow up that way, and through email as well. But
Right.
you know, so that was the most unique part, is just having it timed and being kind of prepared to ask the proper questions and be there, which it's good to be concise. You're going to speak with a lot of employers or potential connections. And we want to be cognizant of that 15-minute clock for this for last fair. I'm not sure how it's going to be structured for the next one, but that was definitely the biggest difference, because in person you kind of like let time flow by. One of the conversations, I had a really good deep conversation with the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, and we literally got cut off mid-sentence. Like, I don't know how. That was the first conversation I had, because that recruiter actually reached out to me prior to the job fair to schedule time to talk. And so being cognizant of that time, I think that's the biggest thing. And being prepared. I took some good notes. Everything's there. It's all digitally there. I mean, I still, like, just yesterday I went back to the actual job fair page, and I still have all that contact information there. So that's also good, knowing that it's stored, which is nice virtually, so you can get back to it. I believe for a certain amount of time it'll be there. Still is there for now 3 months away, and just the time frame, being aware of all those things. So I think that was the difference, virtually being on a clock and knowing that you have data stored there too as well.
Right. And I think I'm going to age myself, but it's been eons since I did a career fair. You know, I was straight out of college, and I remember doing a career fair in person, and I was carrying around, you know, my resumes on cardstock. And I remember, you know, companies being impressed that I printed it on cardstock instead of paper. So I also think it's kind of unique when we get in this virtual world that, you know, ways to set yourself apart, you know, ways that people can remember you. And I think even simple as, you know, following up with a recruiter, even the small things like that can make a huge difference. We have a question in the chat. I think I'm going to throw it to you, John. Stephen asked, do you think cybersecurity is interdisciplinary? And if so, is it more so than other careers?
I think the TLDR is yes. I think computer science in general is perhaps more interdisciplinary than many other fields, in that there's a large amount of work in pure computer science, but a lot of the other fields and parts of it are applied to different domains. And I'll say that is descriptive of cybersecurity as well, because the field of cybersecurity itself is so diverse that the kinds of skills that you need to be successful, for example, doing governance, risk, compliance sort of work, is quite a bit different than if you're doing incident response or malware analysis, or on the research side, applying different skills to solve those problems. So yes, very much so interdisciplinary, as an incredibly diverse sort of meta field of computer science and security.
And then kind of jumping off that, David, when you went to the career fair, were you seeking specific roles, or were you kind of open to new opportunities? You know, like I said, some people don't even know what a national lab is. So were you open to new opportunities and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think to echo kind of on what John said, mentioning, and actually a good question by Stephen Knudsen there. Hope I said that right. interdisciplinary. That's like my background. I mean, if you look, I've been in the financial sector. I've been in the project management sector for, I have an environmental science degree. So I definitely didn't have like one company where, obviously Argonne's top of my list. It's nearby. It's something I've been very passionate about for a long time, having an environmental science degree. It's just, I needed some experience and some networking, hence the, going back to the networking to get to where I am today to even be talking in this, webinar. And so, no, it wasn't a specific thing, even though I did have some companies that actually reached out to me once they saw my resume too prior to the meeting. But I believe in having an open mind. We're in a changing economy. A lot of things have changed. There's serious threats to our cybersecurity, both nationally and at private company levels. And anything I could do to support, my country, our cybersecurity in general is what's of importance to me. So I want to work into a role that I'm going to be comfortable with and that I'm going to be able to be my best at. So rather than just picking one company, I mean, there's a lot of organizations that are going to have similar roles, but they're going to need to be, served in a different way based on their goals. But I am interested in the public sector in particular, just because of where we're at with cybersecurity. I really do believe it's important for our country and just for our future. So I'm open to everything. And I think that's the way everybody should come into a job fair, is don't assume one company isn't worth talking over another. I literally reached out to some companies, and unfortunately I wasn't able to connect with a few of them just because it was busy. So in that time frame when I was waiting for another company, I had to jump to another one, unfortunately, even though it wasn't the one that I was initially, wanting to speak to. You have to make an order. You got to put your time in. You can't talk to everybody, unfortunately. But no, I believe in having an open mind to that. And interdisciplinary is a great word. I think the more, you learn as a candidate and the more you're willing to reach out to, the more you're willing to do, the better off you're going to be in terms of a long-term successful career and finding what you really want to do. So yeah, I'm open to everything, and I would advise everybody to be open to everything possible as well.
Awesome. And then John, I'm going to jump to you. I see the loaded question over there of what is a national lab. If you want to speak to that, you can, but also if someone is looking to work in the national lab or that kind of industry, do you have any piece of advice for them?
Sure. So when we talk about the national labs, we're typically referring to I think it's 13 Department of Energy national laboratories. I will not try to name all of them off the top of my head, but that includes Argonne National Lab and Lawrence Livermore National Lab, speaking for myself, as well as 11 others. And their role in the national labs is to provide science and technology expertise to the US government and our partners, and doing the kinds of big science that can't be done anywhere else. So things that are too big for someone in private industry to try to solve, that goes to the national labs. So I think that it's probably the most succinct definition of what a national lab is. And please remind, sorry, what was the second half of that question?
Just kind of any advice that you have someone for looking to go into, like, you start as an intern, what advice you would give someone kind of stepping into that role or looking to start, in a national lab kind of setting.
So national labs, they occupy sort of an interesting space in the sort of typical way we talk about like going off after graduation and getting jobs, and that a lot of times we talk about like government versus industry versus academia, and the different pros and cons of each of those areas. And national labs sits between all of those, where our heritage is like there were partnerships between the government and academia and industry to make things happen. And so there is a tremendous amount of flexibility at the labs to do a really wide range of work and have sort of the best of all three worlds. So I think that if I were to say anything about what's important coming into a national lab is flexibility and understanding how to use your skills to solve lots of different problems. And to the question, is Sandia Lab one of those? Yes, Sandia National Lab is one of the DOE national labs, and it's one of the three NNSA national labs, along with Lawrence Livermore and Los Alamos.
Awesome, thank you. All right, back to you, David. Let's see if we have anything. Okay. So David, after your most recent experiences, would you say that you learned anything new about yourself or surprised yourself in any way in like your professional setting or going forward? Did you have spark a new interest? Switch fields?
Prior, I knew how important cybersecurity and, multiple facets of that were, how important they were. However, it really hit home just the breadth and just how wide and how every company now has to be cautious of that in the private and public sector. It's a booming field right now, and it has to be because there are serious threats, both domestic and, globally. So I think the biggest thing I learned is just how quickly this field's going to grow. Both and anything that needs to be done, even the electrical grid, all our structures, they all need to be supported by some type of cybersecurity in this day and age. So the biggest thing I learned about myself in that is just a field that I would have probably never just, I didn't go to school for it back even 10 years ago when I graduated with my bachelor's. It was a field that existed, but I think recently, like just you watch the news and just yesterday we have, whether it's a minor attack or a larger attack, just an attack on our grid or an attack on something. Digitally, and it's just important to have that. So I think what this did is it actually opened me up to a field that I wasn't even aware of how large it was. I knew it was important, but just the breadth of how it covers pretty much everything in every way in our lives it affects us. So that was the biggest thing that I think I learned from the fair about cybersecurity and about myself, is I feel like because I have an interdisciplinary background, I feel like I do fit into quite a few more roles than I realized. I think we sell ourselves short sometimes because we think, oh, that role can't be for me because, oh, it looks this complicated. When I spoke with a recruiter, he even said, looking at your resume, you're actually qualified for a lot of these roles, at least for an interview. We got to start that process. And that really opened my eyes up to other opportunities. So I think, just like I say to everybody, don't count yourself out of things. Apply, and be your best self during your interview, and that's what's important.
And I want to jump off of something you said. So when I started as an intern 13 years ago, I had no prior experience with cybersecurity. My background at that point in college had been bioinformatics research on sort of small scale high performance computing, and just happened to go check a box saying, yeah, cyber is one of several fields I'd be interested in an internship working on, and got a call and ended up doing cyber stuff for an internship. And here I am 13 years later, still doing it. And having that other knowledge from the HPC and bioinformatics work, I've seen it show up throughout my career as being really influential.
Awesome. I see the plenty of questions coming in. That's awesome. For time's sake, I'm going to jump forward to Robert from Employment Boost, and we have a section at the end for questions that we'll get to them. That was great from David and John. That was awesome. So we're going to jump forward to Robert, and then I'm going to come back to all these questions at the end, if that works. Amanda, if you could jump the slide. All right. Okay. Oh, sorry. Yeah, Robert, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Robert. I work at Employment Boost, as you can see. Hello, everyone. I've been working at Employment Boost for over 4 years now. Prior to that, I worked at a tech company in the Bay Area in content marketing. So my career has mostly been writing focused. At Employment Boost, we do a variety of services. I would say our bread and butter is the resume writing. That's primarily what I will be talking about in today's presentation. But we do also touch on interview preparation, job search advice, career planning, college planning, personal branding, all the services listed there. I think a couple of the questions in the chat actually are things I might be able to touch on a little bit as well, again, when we get to questions just related to like the job search and kind of preparing for that, especially, as an entry-level candidate. So yeah, that's kind of Employment Boost, and that's me in a nutshell, I guess. So first of all, what is a resume? I guess it might seem like a basic question. I'm sure all of you are at least somewhat familiar with resumes, probably all have resumes of your own. But I think there is sometimes a misconception on what a resume actually is. A lot of people will fill up their resumes with, and I know this maybe is less pertinent to people at a more entry level, but a lot of people we see who we work with will fill up their resumes with basic duties and responsibilities of their job. So for me, it might be working with clients, it might be writing resumes, just the ins and outs, and sometimes that is relevant and important to include. But the real purpose of a resume is to differentiate yourself. It's to show your strongest skills, your accomplishments, to show how you'll be an asset to a company. Not just that you can do the basics of a job, that is important, but like what you offer that goes above and beyond. So your achievements, your wins, process improvements you've helped implement, things that really are highlights and things that really just are specific to you and go beyond just generic kind of duties and responsibilities. And because of that, the resume does not need to be all encompassing. I know, especially for people on the more technical side of things, there can really be an urge to want to get every last software program in there, every knowledge, every piece of skill, all that sort of stuff. A lot of the times the resumes that we work with that are the longest are people who are on the tech side of things. But sometimes, it can be good to include all that, but the resume doesn't need to be all encompassing. People, as I think was touched on already, hiring managers, recruiters do not have much time to give to people. They are not going to be looking through, reading every word. So it should just be giving kind of the highlights, the key information, stuff that you can use to talk about an interview, something that will catch the eye of whoever's reading it. And then finally, the resume is really, really important. It's probably going to be the first thing that somebody sees when they talk to you. Again, as has been discussed, networking is extremely valuable and important. Your chances of getting an interview, landing a job go up exponentially if you do have connections, if you do have that networking component. But if not, and even sometimes if so, the resume is going to be the first thing. And therefore, it's really, really important to give a good impression of yourself. And that goes beyond just your skills and knowledge and abilities, but just like, is the writing professional? Is your grammar correct? Is the formatting consistent? Like, these are things that maybe you don't like writing, maybe you've never really worked in depth on a resume before. Even if it's not something super fancy, it's not something that you feel like is, you're the best writer, it's going to be, poetic. It should still be clean, consistent, and very easy to read. Because maybe even if you're not the best qualified for a role, if you have a resume that does stand out for being professional, that's really easy to find all your skills and achievements, that can really put you on the right foot, even if maybe you don't have every single qualification, because again, it does demonstrate that professionalism right off the bat. So talk a little bit about this as well. Who will be reading your resume? It really depends. It depends on the company. It depends on the industry. A lot of times it will be supervisors. A lot of times the person who you might be working with is going to be the person who's reading your resume. That's actually how it used to work at our company. The manager of the team would review resumes when you'd be hiring. They'd sift through and pass along however many people to interview the early stage of interview rounds. Sometimes it is human resources. That's actually what we do now. Where human resources is kind of the first line. They're the ones who review resumes and decide kind of who to pass on to the team to start the interview process. Sometimes there'll be a talent acquisition specialist. That could be an internal person at a company, or it could be, a third-party recruiter or headhunter who's reading the resume and trying to find a candidate for a position. So they could be really trying to find, maybe an entry-level person to grow, learn with a company. It could be for some program, some development initiative, whatever. So all sorts of different people. And finally, and this is what I'll be talking about on the next slide, is the applicant tracking systems. It's probably something you've heard of. It sounds kind of scary. They're called ATS for short. And those are the things that more often than not, especially I would say in more corporate settings, are going to be the first line that kind of go through the resume and sift through it. And yeah, I will talk a lot more about that on the next slide. So what is an applicant tracking system? Again, you've probably heard of it. Maybe you haven't. Maybe you've just heard of ATS. The long and short of it is that it is an electronic database that stores resumes. There is not any one applicant tracking system. There are dozens, if not hundreds of them. There's some that are more common than others. Plenty of companies, especially larger ones, will have their own that are proprietary. Because of that, it is impossible to create a resume that targets all applicant tracking systems. However, there are a lot of overlaps between them, and what I'll be talking about are some of the commonalities that will kind of help best get your resume through those ATS systems. So what do? They screen resumes before a human being looks at them, essentially. And the reason it does that is because, or the reason companies do that, I guess I should say, is that, for a lot of companies, I think previously it was mentioned, there are big agencies that hire hundreds of people. Even with somebody dedicated to hiring, that's a lot of resumes to read through. You want to speed up the process. You want to make sure that the most qualified candidates are getting through. And how ATS does that is it does kind of review the resume, looks at the frequency, placement of keywords and key phrases on the resume, which I'll be talking about on the following slide, as well as looking through location, education, certifications, etc. So for example, I think I saw a question about like a CompTIA certification. Obviously a big deal. There are plenty of ATS systems that will be looking through that. It'll rank your resume higher if it sees something like that, or Network Plus, or project management was mentioned. If you have a PMP, those are all things that might help get your resume through just by being on the resume without even talking about it, without really knowing necessarily even what has gone into that. Just the placement on the resume could help get it through an ATS system. So you're not really writing just for a person, though you are writing for a person. It needs to be legible and readable for an actual human being as well. You are writing to get through this ATS, this kind of artificial intelligence system. And then lastly, graphics and images don't always work. In fact, most of the time they do not work correctly in applicant tracking systems. They are mostly designed to read words and to process those. So having big images, graphics, tables, charts can actually, one, they are almost never read by applicant tracking systems, which means that all the content you have in them won't get through. Sometimes it's worse than that, which it can cause the entire ATS to short out, mark your resume as spam or trash, or just pass you over. So actually, and I'll be talking about this a little bit later on kind of the wrap up, we actually, generally speaking, do not recommend including any sorts of graphics or images or charts or tables on your resume. I know they can look flashy. They can be a good way to show information. But in today's kind of modern job search, unfortunately, most of the time, they are not recommended. So I did mention key terms, keywords and key phrases. And these are phrases or business terms that will be searched in the applicant tracking system to narrow down the candidate pool. And sometimes these can sound very generic when we're working with clients and we tell them like, hey, look, we need to mention this. And they'll be like, well, that's so obvious. Of course, I know how to do that. That's such an easy skill. It doesn't necessarily matter if you don't have some of those on there, your resume might not get through. And they are particular to the job. There are some that you will see over and over and over again, regardless of job, regardless of industry, regardless of career level. Communication skills are something that are in, I don't know how many percentage of job requisitions and qualification sections, a whole lot. Something like problem solving, also very common. You might see time management or multitasking. Those are some of the more general ones. For more specific things, I think, some of the stuff is already mentioned, like incident response, like vulnerability assessment, specific software, other things that might be more pertinent. I think for computer science, just the actual term computer science, maybe you've done machine learning, maybe you've done artificial intelligence, they can be more specific. And the way to find out and kind of best tailor your resume to the jobs you're interested in are to review the job descriptions. So to look through them, you don't need to look through hundreds of them, but try to look through, 5 to 10 of maybe the jobs companies you're most interested in and see what are commonalities in the qualifications. Like what software are you expected to know? What are the core skills for the position you're applying for? And make sure those are included in the resume. We do not suggest lying if it's something that you do not know, if it's a software you have no familiarity in. It's going to be evident pretty soon on in the process, especially for a technical role, that you don't know that. So, if it's something that you feel like you have some familiarity with, it's something maybe you can hit the ground running on, even if you're not an expert, that's still an area where it's okay. But yeah, we generally do recommend being honest on the resume. There are lots of tips and tricks to kind of help get the resume through applicant tracking systems, but then you can run into issues in the interview process and hiring process. And then even if you're able to get through that, once you start, if you're underqualified, underprepared, it's not going to go well for you if you kind of fudge things a little to get there. So that said, again, you do want to make sure you have all the relevant skills and qualifications. If you have them, put them on your resume. And tailoring your resume. Again, you want to kind of highlight whatever is the most relevant. So if you're entry level, maybe you don't have any professional experience in your realm of what you want to go into. Or maybe you just have a brief internship. The internship is probably going to be the most relevant thing. That should be pretty high up on the resume. If you don't have an internship, if you don't have any work experience that's relevant anyway, you'll want to lead with the most relevant things. So that could be coursework. It could be projects you've completed. At entry level, especially for technical people, sometimes we'll have whole sections entirely dedicated to projects, like what kind of software you've developed or systems you've built, or even just programs you've utilized in your coursework. One, those do actually frequently have keywords and key phrases in them, especially the coursework. And two, you can expand a little on the skills, what you've learned, to best show that you can do the job, even if you maybe don't have the professional experience. Also, you want to make it personal, not just with technical skills that you might know and that probably a lot of the people applying to it may know, but what differentiates you as a candidate can often be the soft skills, even in the technical realm. Communication, again, important for almost any job, any position, any industry, wherever. If you find you have really good communication skills, if you really do work well on a team, if you do find in your group projects that you naturally gravitate towards leadership, those are all things to include. Again, they can sound more general, but they are things that could differentiate you. So, again, review those common entry-level roles, see what qualifications pop up, both the soft skills and the technical skills. If it's something you don't know and it's something you feel like you can learn with, your own study, your own research, just taking a boot camp, training course, whatever, by all means, go out and do that. If it's something you feel like you can hone, just kind of even outside, just if you want to practice your communication skills, teamwork, etc., there are all ways you can do that. But yeah, just review, see what you need to learn, and place that on the resume. So when you're actually writing the resume and sitting down to it, you want to best leverage your accomplishments. Again, I mentioned at the beginning, you don't want to just put your duties or what you've done. Again, this would speak more to a job maybe than a project, but you also similarly don't want to put like the bare bones of anything you've done. You want to really emphasize the impact. So the best way to do that is situation, action, response. It's a way of structuring bullet points. So for example, I could say about myself that, performs resume writing services. That's the situation. Action, you could say utilizing a combination of customer service, editing, and communication skills to understand customer needs and craft content that best fits what they're looking for, and then result, achieves 95% customer satisfaction and helps however many percentage of people I work with get jobs. So the result does not have to be quantifiable, and I'm not saying that those are my actual numbers, but it is helpful. It is important to have metrics. That's kind of the third point there. And if you don't have metrics, some fields are great. Sales, you have lots of numbers, you have lots of metrics, you have revenue growth, you have clients obtained. Maybe you don't, but maybe you still have number of projects that you've worked on, or number of people that you've led on a team, or other things that you can put that still, even if they're not maybe super impressive, still show an example of your work and what you've accomplished. And then in terms of the overall layout, we do nearly always recommend a reverse chronological history, which means starting from your most recent job and going down. Especially for entry-level candidates, for people who have gone through career changes where there's some interesting stuff, maybe something you did 15 years ago is actually more relevant than what you're doing now. There are alternate methods, but most of the time you want to start with your most recent, go down. And, if you have room, you will, of course, try to keep the resume on one page if possible for entry-level roles. Even technical ones, it is best to have a one-page resume. If you need to fill that out, if maybe you have a project or two, but you don't have any relevant internships, you can absolutely include other roles that you've had. Even if they're not career relevant, they do still show your professionalism. Like, hey, if you've done babysitting, that still requires you to look after people. It requires you, again, to have communication. There is an element almost of customer service involved in terms of, dealing with the child as well as the parents. It could be stuff you've done in terms of assisting as like a teacher's assistant. Whatever the case may be, if it's even semi-relevant, If you think it could help you, put it on there. And again, until you really get more of that career experience, there will be a lot more of that less relevant stuff on there. When I was applying to jobs, I didn't have any internships in my chosen field. I had a bunch of things. I had tutoring was the main thing that I did, kind of as my college job. And that was kind of the main experience that I had. Did not want to go into education or tutoring, but that was kind of the most relevant experience that was on there. And then in terms of how your resume should actually look, again, I mentioned this in regards to the graphics and images and related to the applicant tracking systems, but it is actually relevant for human readers as well. So just to give you an example, I love the color blue. I went to University of Michigan, go blue. I love blue. If I see a resume that has a lot of blue on it, I might, some little inside part of me might have a positive reaction to that. On the other hand, maybe not a huge fan of Ohio State. If I see something that's red and gray themed, again, some internal part of me, maybe not a huge fan of it. Or it doesn't even have to be that intrinsic. It has to do with your college ties or biases or anything like that. It could just be you don't like a color. So if I like the color blue, I see a blue color resume, maybe I like it, but somebody else might not like the color blue. And all of that to say, we generally recommend straightforward black and white resumes. Yes, they are not flashy. They might not demonstrate any of your graphical abilities. Maybe they don't show some particular thing that's color related that you want to include. Overall, that's probably not going to have a huge impact, and we want to limit bias as much as possible. It can limit positive bias, but limiting the negative bias is even more important than that. You want to get your resume, give your resume as much of a chance as possible as getting to the next step. And to do that, you really want to avoid any sort of things that could be distracting, that could be bias inducing. Again, that could also be a graphic or an image. Maybe you think it looks really nifty. Somebody else might think it looks cluttered, takes up a lot of room. So simple formatting. You want to make sure everything is top down. That's kind of the easiest thing to read. Naturally go from section to section, from most recent experience to earliest experience. It's the easiest way to do things, and it generally works the best in applicant tracking systems.
Awesome. Thank you, Robert. I know there's some specific questions that jumped to you, and we're almost to our questions slide. We threw this slide in here, obviously, coming from the CyberForce program. We have our next career fair coming up. It is a collegiate career fair. So we had a professional one back in June. This is our collegiate one. It is all virtual again. So it's a 3-hour time frame, 1 to 4 Central Time. You don't have to be on for full 3 hours, but we will have a variety of industry, labs, and the private sector as well. And then also, if you happen to be with a company or an university who would be interested in a booth, we are always open for new collaborative opportunities. So we at least want to throw this on there in case there's anyone who was interested. Signups are all through our CyberForce website. All righty, so I'm going to try and get to everyone's questions. I know we have about 15 minutes left. And if we run out of time, you can always email us at that CyberForce. I'll throw it in the chat so I don't say it wrong. Email, and we will get back to you. I'll start from, Robert. I saw there was a straight question that said, is there a cumulative GPA cutoff you would recommend putting on your resume?
Yes, this does depend on industry a bit. For example, probably not relevant to anybody here, people who are in the consulting world generally like to see very high GPAs. The cutoff might be as high as 3.5 or even higher. I would say generally don't include anything under a 3.0. We would say 3.0 to 3.5 is in the area where it might not be amazing, awe-inspiring, but it's probably something that it will show you have pretty good grades on the whole. Anything below a 3.0 would probably not recommend. I would say that's a pretty standard cutoff.
Right. And then these questions are open to any of you, John and David, if you want to jump on. I know it's not one size fits all, but this question kind of pertains to, is it a better idea to kind of pursue a graduate degree, or is it more ideal in today's world to kind of go find that internship first before, taking on the next venture of graduate school? Or if you guys had any personal experience with that.
Yeah, so I can take that. So this sort of also fits into a discussion about like certifications and certificate programs. And it's really that it depends on what you want to do, and recognizing too that what you want to do can change over time, heaven forbid. So I personally, my undergrad is computer science. I have a bachelor's in computer science and a master's degree in computer science as well. And for the work that I'm doing, that works, and that because of that, I have the skills to do my job. There are plenty of positions out there where you don't need a master's degree to be successful and productive. I'll go so far as to say there are even some that you don't need a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree for. And the same applies to certifications. You don't need to have every certification under the sun to be successful. But when you're looking at the opportunities available to you and the things that you think are that you are interested in, or at the very least, the things that are not what you dislike, look at what is necessary to be successful, and sort of use that as your goal for what you want to do.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going off that too, personally, if you'd have told me 15 years ago where I was now, I probably wouldn't believe you. I kind of, did my undergrad, started my career, realized I didn't love it. So I kind of found my passion going through graduate school. So had I not, kind of taken that break, I don't know where I'd be now. So I think it all just depends on, your personal journey yourself. There's no one size fits all. But I think just, going out there and finding new experiences and, like David said earlier, being open-minded is key, especially in today's, a lot of things are virtual now or hybrid. Even just kind of navigating that is different than it was 5 years ago. Let's see.
If I wanted to jump in really fast to something that Robert had said, and I like did my nice little clap in there. You had said in resumes, I'm one that reads resumes, one from virtual career fairs, from in-person career fairs, from the like of job boards that we have at Argonne, formatting, and I mean, part of it is I'm OCD on that, so I can tell like a 12-point font period when everything else is 11 point font, but so I don't disqualify people for that. But to your point, like misspelling, like we all know what Word is or whatever, Apple's version of it is. Like spell check is so easy to use, like run through it. And I know sometimes like doesn't work, but like it's very, just ask a friend, ask a teacher, ask someone to review your resume, just because we all read things in such a way all the time that we read it how we think we wrote it instead of reading what we actually wrote. So to verify that like it makes sense to someone else. Again, because we write it, we again know what we meant. But to your point, Robert, like computer systems don't always know what we mean. Or when someone else reads it, doesn't always mean that it's the same context. So just be mindful of that. And again, just look at your paper, like almost like take a step back and go like, if you're using bullets, do the bullets all line up? Are they the same type of bullets? Like, I know that's nitpicky sounding, but like if you really want the job, you'll take the 5 extra minutes to make sure the bullets are all the same. Because it's things that we notice, because that's what we're looking for someone to be super nitpicky when we get you into the job, because we want you to be successful in the job that we're putting you in. So I know it sounds super nitpicky, but I was super excited when you said that.
Yeah, and please, when you're writing some kind of objective or cover letter for a position, please spell the organization's name correctly.
Yeah, I would say for cover letters, it is good. You don't need to write like a whole missive of, I would not recommend writing, spending 2-3 hours on whatever cover letter. You can use kind of a template, but yes, you do need to make sure all the basics for each position you apply for, correct? The name of the position is the actual one you're applying for. It's not copy and pasted from the previous position. The name of the company, and at least include a sentence or two about why you actually are interested in that company. The rest of it can be maybe almost exactly the same if it's a very similar role, but just like why, why this national laboratory, why this position, why are you interested, why would you be a good fit? It can literally be 2 sentences. It might take 5 or 10 minutes, but yeah, just make sure that that basic stuff is correct for a cover letter. They're not as big as they were when I was leaving school, not to date myself, but they are still fairly frequently used, I'd say.
Awesome. And Robert, I don't know if this was back in the beginning of the webinar, but it asked about, are there specific listservs or websites that track kind of career fair events? I know from our end, it's company specific that we, send out our webinars and career fairs and things like that. I don't know if there is like some tool or maybe something that is publicly available where you can follow along. Maybe it's sector specific, but I'm not aware of any. I know that question popped up earlier on tonight.
Honestly, that sounds like a great thing that we could do. I'm actually not aware of such a thing. I'm sure there are some that are maybe industry specific or location specific. Honestly, that's something I will probably ask when tomorrow when I go back to the team, because I'm actually not aware of such a thing. It seems like it would be very helpful. Again, I'm sure that there probably are some, again, for very specific industries or for locations. I would also just search, virtual can make things trickier than in the past where like everything was in person, but you can still just search, your location, career fairs near such and such, and you'll probably get a pretty good list just from a Google search.
Awesome. And then I don't know if Amanda, you want to touch on this, the NIST framework. I know CyberForce obviously relies on that, but I don't know if you saw it in other curriculum as well.
Sure. So I don't, I know there's a goal to map positions to the NIST framework and a cyber aspect, and I'm not saying just an Argonne, I think is a federal level, but I think NICE continues to go through version changes and additions of work roles, since it's not always a one-to-one mapping. But I do believe, CyberForce at least does map our main competition to the NIST NICE work roles. So students are well aware where their competencies are, and I hate to use the word deficiencies, but areas in which they can improve on throughout the competition for them at the end. So do I think it's a bad idea to design your curriculum around the work roles? No, because I do know that there is a fair amount of organizations out there that do utilize the NIST NICE framework as a means to help with defining work roles and what are the actual means and like the skills and tasks that someone would actually be doing on a day-to-day basis. And so having them understand what that is, to Robert's point, being able to put that in a resume to highlight early in understanding, I think would benefit someone.
Yeah, and speaking for Lawrence Livermore, like I think we aspire to build our postings and job descriptions around the NICE framework, but I know we are not doing that consistently at this point. I mentioned in chat earlier the CyberFire program, which is a different Department of Energy effort that I'm involved in, and we have done sort of similar thing to CyberForce there and gone through our core content for those activities and labeled them with some metadata talking about and mapping things over to the NICE framework so that participants can come out and say, here's what I gained from participating.
Steph, you're on mute.
Man, it's been years and I still can't get it. Okay, to that last question, I can throw up our website in the chat here for the career fair. And I think there was 2 more questions about this one right here and then one earlier in the evening about internship positions, just kind of like what is expected of an intern, upon entering the field
Yeah.
as an early professional.
Yeah, it is tricky. I think the earlier question, I was actually just scrolling up as well, mentioned that sometimes you see jobs that require you to have previous experience for an internship when you're still in school, which seems contradictory. It can be, and in those cases, you all you can do is apply. It's not costing you any money. The worst you can get is rejected if they're looking for somebody for an intern role, possibly at an intern pay. For somebody who has years of experience, that's kind of their choice. So, if you apply it and don't get it, it's not the end of the world. In terms of like what might be expected, again, I think, when you look at a job, that you apply for and you see the qualifications and responsibilities, usually companies are pretty honest because they want to make sure that they're getting the right candidates. So if you match with a lot of the skills and qualifications, you should be relatively qualified for the role. Obviously, any role, especially at an entry level, is going to be a huge learning experience. You're not going to know everything going in. But that's where really reading it comes into play. And I'm apologies if I mispronounce your name, Shenkai's question about entry level certs. That's also again where I would recommend reading the job postings. If you're seeing that certification pop up quite a bit, great. But I would say again for an ATS, even if they're maybe looking for other certs, if you have one that's actually higher level, that could still be very impressive to a human that's reading it. So it's definitely still something to include. Any relevant certifications you may have, I would definitely recommend including if you have them.
I won't also speak for John, but I'm going to gander on this one from lab to lab over here. The Department of Energy has several different types of internships. So, and again, not saying that the lab internships are better and or less than other internships, but they do offer a wide variety. So the technical side of internships is a newer one. It's called Omni, OMNI. And it's more of a generic bucket pool that you can input your resume into, and us at the labs have the opportunity to look at your resume and then kind of have a very short pseudo interview with you and or just kind of select your resume. And you get the opportunity, honestly, to reject us as well if you're not interested in our lab or our project. For Argonne itself, I tend to be a much more fluid mentor in summertime. I provide a very open-ended project, and at the end of the day, you come in and my job is really to kind of give people the opportunity to understand, is this really a field you're gonna like? So I tend to really like bringing in the freshmen, sophomore, juniors, where you still hopefully have some time to decide whether or not this is a field you're really going to enjoy, or decide early. Because honestly, to all of everyone's point, I was a business major. I finished my accounting degree and then I accidentally took the wrong class. And so here I am in cybersecurity, and I do workforce development. So I end up in, a whole different arena. So that's kind of where I want to make sure people are enjoying the work they're doing. Lab internships they can be very straightforward, but a lot of times the lab's just a very different beast of a job place, to John said earlier. So we tend to, be a little bit more fluid so everyone understands what the lab's like.
And Umberto asked a question regarding internships at labs in summer and spring. I'll start off by saying that we're talking about here about the national labs, but within DOE, there are many other opportunities at other sites that aren't labs, such as several of our other offices and some of our sites. So just off the top of my head, the Kansas City National Security Campus and NSA headquarters, a couple others have opportunities for internships as well. Say most of the labs have internship programs through the summer. Whether or not there is some formal cyber program varies, or if it's rolled into something else. Some have spring or other off summer internships. But that's, I can't really speak to as to how many do or do not. Livermore does offer stuff year round, but it's just smaller than the summer.
Awesome. I know we're a little past our 7 o'clock mark. We really appreciate David, John, and Robert taking the time out to join us on this Wednesday evening. And thank you all for joining in the wonderful questions. And again, if you have any other questions that pop up, or if you want to connect with someone, please feel free to reach out to us. Our email's on the CyberForce website, but also it is, I think, there we go. It is in the chat now. But yeah, feel free to send us an email, any questions or any feedback or any comments. We are happy to hear. And thank you all again for joining us.